Chairman Cardin, Co-Chairman Cohen, distinguished Senate and House members of the Helsinki Commission, thank you for the opportunity to speak on an issue as vital to transatlantic security as supporting Europe's energy security today. As Senator Cardin said, my name is Dr. Benjamin L. Schmitt. I've previously served as European Energy Security Advisor at the U.S. Department of State, and I'm currently a research fellow at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington, and a fellow of the Duke University Center for International and Global Studies. With heavy fighting ongoing in Ukraine and the wounds of Bucha and Mariupol still open and bleeding, the transatlantic community doesn't have the luxury of time to define an effective path forward in countering this new phase of Russian aggression. But this is why we need an equally aggressive, multidisciplinary, anticipatory diplomacy approach to respond. This is especially true concerning Europe's dependence on Russian energy resources, because Putin's Kremlin has weaponized energy against Europe for years, and because hydrocarbon revenues have played an outsized role in funding Moscow's war-making capability. Given this reality, we need to take a lessons-learned approach to identify energy policies that have been successful to curb the Kremlin's energy influence in the lead-up to the war, and we also need to be clear-eyed about the mistakes that were made so they are not repeated again. So 3 key lessons I want to leave you with that should guide policymakers today include, first, energy and critical infrastructure proposals advanced by authoritarian nations like Russia are not just commercial deals. The second lesson is that energy diversification infrastructure has been effective at countering Russian energy weaponization. And third, that sanctions have been an effective tool to slow and stop Kremlin malign energy influence. On the first lesson, given total state control in authoritarian nations like Russia, nearly every sector of society can be weaponized to advance geopolitical aims, from cyberspace to supply chains, and yes, even space assets. This includes Russia's long and sordid history of weaponizing energy against Europe, including numerous gas cutoffs of Ukraine for political blackmail. In 2021, the Kremlin intentionally limited natural gas volumes exported to European storages, many of which are owned by Kremlin-controlled Gazprom itself. This created EU-wide gas scarcity that limited the latitude of foreign policy responses to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Russia also uses energy proposals, as has been said, like Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, to advance strategic corruption and elite capture across Europe. This includes former senior officials leaving office only to end up working for Russian state-owned energy firms like Gazprom and Rosneft. While you likely have heard of the infamous case of former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder taking multiple such roles after leaving office, over the last decade, a long line of officials have followed in his footsteps, including from France, Austria, and elsewhere. This trend became so notorious it got a name, Schroederization, and it is dangerously undermining confidence in democratic norms today. On the second lesson, in recent weeks, Moscow has increased its energy pressure to deter a united European response to its invasion of Ukraine, cutting off gas exports to Poland, Bulgaria, Finland, Denmark, and the Netherlands. However, effective energy infrastructure policy driven both by the European Energy Union concept and effective U.S. energy diplomacy over the years has made these countries resilient to Russia's cutoffs. In fact, Poland and Bulgaria were able to neutralize this pressure by opening a myriad of energy infrastructure diversification projects that came online this year. And on the third lesson, finally, we've got to be clear. Congress has been consistently right with its sanctions policies to limit Russian malign influence through energy over the years. This is particularly true when it comes to measures to stop the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Nord Stream 2 was a long-running geostrategic anchor that Germany clung to even as Russia openly created a gas crisis last year and likely emboldened Putin's confidence that energy pressure could limit Western pushback on his looming invasion. Nevertheless, congressional sanctions worked. The Biden administration finally sanctioned Nord Stream 2 AG and its corporate officers in the hours before Russia's invasion, forcing the project into bankruptcy within days and hopefully ending the project for good. So with these lessons in mind, I want to leave you with 3 recommendations. First, we need to dramatically increase transatlantic energy sanctions on the Putin regime. Our collective goal needs to be a total oil and gas embargo of exports from the Russian Federation. But until we get to zero, there's things we can do. First, we can increase tariffs on Russian energy to continue to depress the Urals crude price, Russian crude grade, with respect to the Brent price. We can implement escrow accounts so Russia can't immediately cash in from interim energy sales, and the US and the EU should issue joint sanctions to permanently stop Russian energy export pipelines like Nord Stream 1 while increasing sanctions on insurers and technical service providers for Russian energy ventures. 2, we need a wartime level of effort to deploy energy diversification infrastructure to make Europe independent of Russian energy for good. This also has to include steps to end ownership of EU oil and gas infrastructure by Russians-controlled Rosneft and Gazprom. And 3rd and finally, we need to curb Kremlin strategic corruption in Western democracies. This needs to include Congress passing what I call the Stop Helping America's Malign Enemies, or SHAME Act, to end the possibility for former senior officials and set an example in the transatlantic community that former senior officials in government cannot leave the public trust and then serve for authoritarian nations. This would help end the trend of Schroederization for good. So to close, for the sake of Ukraine's struggle, we must rise to the occasion with effective European energy security policy. And for the sake of those millions of people now exposed to the Kremlin's malice, failure is not an option.